everyone to our weekly masterclass. Today we are talking to Rachel Dobbs, who's a freelancer, and she's going to be telling us everything about how to be a freelancer, top tips, and how we manage to do that in the Southwest, but also far and beyond, where such a fantastic sort of job can take you. First of all, Rachel's just going to introduce herself, tell us where she's from and what type of freelance work she does.
Hiya, Susie, thanks. So, hey everyone, my name's Rachel. I work as a visual artist. I'm based in Plymouth, and a lot of the things I do with a friend of mine called Hannah Rose, and we work under the name Low Profile. So I've been working as an artist since just after I graduated from my degree, which is in the distant past now, in 2003. And since that time, for big chunks of that time and right now, I've worked as a freelancer. So a freelancer means that you're working for yourself rather than being employed by someone else. Although sometimes I've also had part-time jobs or employment with other people. And I got this nickname, 5 Jobs Dobbs. And I think that's probably quite similar for lots of different freelancers, is that you'll always have lots of different things on the go at once. So you'll often be juggling lots of balls, trying to make things work and trying to fit things in with each other, so that you can kind of stay sane, so that you can pay your rent, and so that you can take on different work that you really enjoy and that you're really excited about. So the different types of freelancing that I tend to do, I work as a visual artist. So some of the freelancing I'm doing is making art projects happen in different places. Some of it is education. So I might be teaching or doing visiting lectures. I might do workshops or seminars. A lot at the moment that I do are online sessions, training over Zoom, things like that. And I also write and publish different types of online resources. So that was something that I learned as a lecturer at universities and art colleges, kind of how to make online resources and how to do that type of thing. And that's something that I can kind of continue on with as a freelancer too. So all of this kind of way of working and this sense of like having lots of different jobs or taking on lots of different tasks often leads me to be doing lots of things at once, which can be a bit of a like mind jam in lots of ways. Sometimes your attention and your focus is a bit split across different things. And sometimes you might be working on one big long project for a longer kind of period of time. So all of that experience and all of this time that I've been working in this way, one of the things that I'd like to do today is like share some top tips with you guys. So if you're thinking about starting to work freelance, starting to work self-employed and for yourself, hopefully these top tips will kind of send you into the right direction. And all of these things I've learned the hard way, and usually learned by completely making mistakes. So hopefully this means that you don't have to do any of that. I'll have saved you that bit of extra work, and it'll be like a bit of a shortcut for you. So the first thing that I think is really key and really important when you're a freelancer is to get clued up. So to really know and understand about fees, about day rates, about how people will pay you and make payments to you, and how you can get support when things go wrong. So kind of working as part of a trade union and things like that. I noticed that there's a really great video actually by John Aitken, otherwise on the like Rebel Masterclass YouTube channel. And so I'd really recommend checking that out. He goes into lots of depth about how to work out your day rate and work out your worth. And some of the things that I'd like to add to that are like some of the tools and things that I use quite regularly. So one of the things that I find really handy are rate cards. So each trade union and each sector support organisation will usually publish like an industry rate card. And a rate card is just a way of showing like the amount of money you should expect to be paid for a day's work as a freelancer. This is kind of different to the way it works for when you're working in a salaried job, when you've got wages coming in, things like that. And the day rates almost seem a bit like high a lot of the time compared to the hourly rate that you might get paid for working in a different kind of job. And that's because you're covering also all the other work that goes into being able to do that one day's work, one day's paid work. So I've got to do like all my own bookkeeping, my accounts, I've got to pay for my insurance, I've got to buy all my equipment, I've got to cover all the materials in what I do. So all of those things I have to build into this day rate. And a really great way for finding out like what you should be charging people, what the going rate is to look through these different trade union published rate cards. And there's different ones for different parts of the industry. So if you're a performer or a creative practitioner working across things like theatre, music, TV or radio, anything in the entertainment industry, then Equity is your like point of call. So Equity will publish the rates you should get paid. They'll also have things like some sample contracts, which can be really handy to use when you're negotiating things with clients. And they'll usually also give you a route to being able to sign up for insurance. So that's really important. Things like having public liability insurance, which covers you for if anyone tries to sue you when something goes wrong, or professional indemnity insurance. Again, sounds kind of boring. You just have to tick the form, fill it in. But that professional indemnity is in case anyone's trying to sue you for like advice that you've given or consultancy that you're doing. Similarly, like if you're a musician, there's the musicians union. If you work as a technician or do sound, lighting, AV, video editing, things like that, the union's called BEC2. If you're working in museums or in heritage organisations, it's called Prospect. If you're working in universities or education, it's called University College Union. If you're a visual artist, it's called the Artist Union of England. So they're quite easy to Google, quite easy to kind of find out about. And the other benefits of like signing up for membership as part of a trade union is that they're owned and run by their members, so by people like you. And they're working together really to negotiate different things like pay and conditions to influence how employers employ you and how governments act on your behalf. And they're really key to like looking after yourself as a practitioner. So that's somebody who's got your back, especially like when you're a freelancer, it can feel like you're on your own with a lot of things. So it's really important to join up with these types of organisations. They usually also have things like a free legal helpline that you can call in case you get into any problem or difficulty with anything to do with your freelance work, which is really kind of great. So the next tip that I want to talk about, and this is a scary one for a lot of people and one that makes a lot of people kind of cringe, is how to really get good with money. So if you're a freelancer, as I said, like you're also going to have to be your own accountant and like your own account manager. You're going to have to be asking people to pay you and to pay you if you've given them an invoice and they've still not paid up. There's been times definitely that I might have been waiting a few months for somebody to pay me for work that I've done. I have to like chase them quite a bit and that kind of stuff. So I think that sense of like really getting confident about money, getting confident to ask for what you're worth, and getting confident to look after the money that's coming in and going out of your account. Like, one of the things that I always say to people, and again, this is something that I kind of learned the hard way, is that you need to get really good at saving. So you're going to need an emergency fund, like a cushion, rainy day money, in case there's no work, in case you get sick and you can't work for a period of time. And I think it's really useful to be building this up. So the way that I did it was I was working full time in a different job, and I gave myself a year to save up 3 months worth of outgoings. So I worked out all of my budget for the month, what it costs me for my rent, for my bills, for my phone, for my food, all of that kind of stuff, multiplied that by 3. And then that was like my savings target amount. So I spent a year getting that in place before I went back to being like full-time freelance. And that's really a key thing. If you can also build that up to like 6 months of outgoings, you're going to be really fine. You're going to be so, sorted. And I think that's a really important thing to do kind of early on as well. The other part that you're going to have to get used to is doing the maths around what's coming in and what's going out. So there's some great calculators online that are looking at, okay, if I want to earn X amount in a year, then how much do I need to earn every month? How much do I need to earn every week? And how much do I need to earn every day to reach that kind of target? So getting used to doing those kind of maths is going to really help you to work out for yourself how much you need and how much you need to get by. I think that's a really handy thing to know. Because one of the things that happens as a freelancer is some months my income can be way up here, and other months it's way down here. So you want to try and live on a bit more of a balance. And that's going to mean in those different months, they need to balance each other out. Another part of that is getting really good at living on a budget. So really thinking about what you're spending all the time. Again, it's super boring. This is like having your parents lecture you about stuff, but that's going to save you being in a lot of hassle. It's going to save you from those situations where the money runs out. And that's something that you need to do when you're freelancing. So that might be stuff like getting really good at cooking food that you enjoy, living cheaply, healthy meals, using things like a 30-day list for non-essential purchases. So anytime I see something that I think, oh wow, I really like that, I really want that, and I work out whether it's essential or non-essential. And then if it's not essential, I give a little note, a little reminder to myself on my phone. So I don't buy it, I just put the reminder in my phone, and then I can look back on it in 30 days. And if I still want it, if I still think it's brilliant, then I can buy it. So it's like a little cooling off period for yourself. So there might be things like that that you already do. And it's about honing that into your professional life, thinking about how you take that forward as a freelance worker as well. Another kind of tip, and this is a little bit like when I was introducing myself and saying that I do a lot of my work as part of a collective. I think it's really great as a freelancer to work with other people. So you can often feel quite lonely and quite alone, because you might be doing a lot of your work solo. You might be working in a co-working space or in your living room like I am today. And that connection with other people, with other freelancers, is really important. So you might be thinking about how to develop projects together. So you might get together with other freelancers to design and deliver your own projects. Or you might be thinking about actually creating collectives of different kinds. So I think a really nice like first rule of DIY, if you're going to do it yourself, don't do it by yourself. That's a really nice one. And there's great examples of different like freelancer co-ops where freelancers have decided to get together, set up a company, and then take on packages of work that it would be hard for them to do individually. So like there's a producers co-op in Plymouth, which is called Flock Southwest. I think they're a really good example. So that's lots of people who are working freelance and we're taking on contracts and would find themselves either with loads of work or with not enough work. And when they got together, they found a way to really nicely balance it out. So that sense, again, like that's going to come up in all the things that I'm talking about here, is that idea of finding balance. Like you don't want to just be tipped up one end of the seesaw. You want to be finding that like equilibrium to make life a bit easier and a bit more fun, a bit more bearable as well. So some of the stuff that you might want to think about to help you out with working with other people is getting good at using like collaboration software. So things like that you might already use, like Google Docs for shared documents, for shared spreadsheets, shared presentations, file sharing and different things like that, so that you can work and collaborate into different projects, different things, get things organized. You might also be using things like Slack or Discord as a way of chatting. So having like live chat that happens at different times, because you're not all going to be working at the same time as each other, and you're not all going to be available at the same time as each other. Another like really nice thing to do when you start working with other people is to make a map together. So it might be that you're thinking about what the particular resources are in an area that you live or where you're based. You might be thinking also about like mapping out different clients. So who might want to employ you or work with you on different things, and starting to like generate that information together. It's a really nice way of building up this trust, building up this information and building up ideas for how you're going to work together. I think that really works. I think it's quite a nice one. The next one of my tips is again about balance. It's going to be my my kind of top word today. So sometimes freelancers or freelancing is called having a portfolio career. And I found this kind of interesting when I first was like introduced to this idea. So after I graduated, I went to this like kind of evening course, like business training course thing. And the guy at that course was talking about portfolio careers. And I was just like, what do you mean? And he said, well, it's like a folder or a portfolio that you might have at art college, where it's got all these different parts in it. And that's why it's called a portfolio. And I was like, okay, interesting. And more recently, I think it also relates to the way that like people who trade stocks and shares talk about having an investment portfolio. And what they're talking about is having some things that are really high risk, that are really risky. You might lose all of your money doing them, but the reward or the payoff is also really high. And then you'll have other things that are quite low risk. So they're not going to earn you loads and loads of money, but they're constant and they'll keep paying off. And I think actually that's a really good way to think about being a freelancer. So you might want to take some really big risks, and they may or may not pay off, but you also want to have some things that are quite constant. So that might not be the most exciting or fun or challenging work, but it's constant, it keeps coming, and it'll just pay you a bit all the way along. Another way of kind of thinking about this as well is like, if you're working in a salaried job, usually that's quite kind of low risk. You turn up to work, you get paid no matter, if things are going really, really good or if things are going really, really bad. Whereas as a freelancer, you're taking all of that risk yourself. So if you're employed, the company is taking that risk. As a freelancer, you're taking that yourself. And I think one of the things that we can kind of learn during the pandemic and stuff that happened, especially for arts organizations, for artists, for people who are like precariously employed, is that you need to be thinking about this idea of risk in terms of like what happens when there's absolutely no work for some reason. So if all your work happens in face-to-face situations, there's a global pandemic, then you've got no safety net. You're just like out of work all of a sudden. But if some of your work happens face-to-face, if some of your work happens online, if some of your work happens making YouTube videos, if some of your work happens, in any number of different ways of doing things, then you're not so reliant on the one thing. Like similarly, if you work for one organization and that organization goes bust, you go bust with it. So you get made redundant, you don't have a job anymore. So that sense of like, how can I work with a number of different organizations in a number of different ways to make sure that life is a bit like less risky and again, a bit more kind of plain sailing. I think that's the thing that is a really key thing to consider if you're thinking about freelancing. And another thing that kind of goes like parallel to that is it's really good, it's really important to think about what you can specialize in. What it is that you're really good at that other people aren't providing at the moment. So you might want to have an ask around to different people who work in the industry that you want to be in and ask them about what kind of skills are in demand. What kind of things can't they do at the moment in their organizations or in the work that they're doing? And also thinking about that in like a year's time or in 2 years' time or 5 years or 10 years. So you want to spend at least a chunk of your time really honing your skills. So practicing, trying stuff out, getting it wrong, all of this kind of thing to build up those specialist skills that only you have or only you and a small handful of other people have. Similarly, like don't expect to be brilliant at anything straight away. The very first gigs that I got, when I look back at them now, I cringe. Like I'm just like, oh, why did I think that was a good idea? How did I think that was good quality? But that's also just part of learning. It's part of what will happen as you develop your own skills and your own practice. And thinking about this as well, like this idea of how you specialize in something, you might also want to think about a dual career. So where you're splitting your time across some different specialisms. So you might do one thing alongside, so something that is really good at bringing in money, alongside something that really is like your passion, but maybe doesn't bring in much money at the moment. So you might be thinking about how you can rise up these two different parts of what you do, this kind of dual career. They both go alongside each other, even if they don't cross over. And I think that's a kind of interesting thing. Like that's definitely something that I was doing for a long time when I was teaching at colleges and universities. So I had my visual arts practice that was going along here, and I had my education practice that's going along here. And now the projects that I do use both of those sets of skills. And it's a really nice way to kind of bring stuff together in that sense. And then this is like my last tip, but it's probably the one that's going to take the most work, the one that's going to take the most kind of time to work on and work out. And this is really about learning how to tell stories and how to ask for money. You're going to have to do this a number of different times as a freelancer, as a practitioner, really to kind of achieve what you want to in the world. So there's a really nice TED talk on YouTube by Amanda Palmer, who's a musician, and it's called The Art of Asking. And in this video, she talks about what she's kind of learned as a living statue. So she used to do being a living statue on the streets, like a kind of busking. And what that taught her about how to ask for money from strangers. So she's talking about that in terms of like, it's all about making connections with people. It's all about working out what you need and working out how you can access that thing. So I think that's a really nice thing to be thinking about, and something that you're going to have to do quite a lot. So you'll usually have to like pitch for work in some way. People will have to get to know who you are, what your skills are. They'll have to build up some trust in you. And if you were doing things like applying for funding for projects, so say you and a gang of other people are getting together to like design and make your own project, you might be applying to the Arts Council or another type of funder. You might be crowdfunding even. You're going to have to get really good at this process of telling the story of what it is that you do and what it is that you want to achieve. So there's a really nice tool, again, that's available from the Plymouth Culture website, which is called the Fundraising Story Canvas. And in this, it kind of gives you like a framework to set up your stories in terms of identifying what the problem is, what the solution is, and how you kind of solve that thing. The value that you bring to different situations, or the work that you do brings to different situations. Being really clear about like who benefits from that, and how you do all of your communication with the people involved. So I think those kind of like basics around storytelling and around asking for cash, and whether that's about being paid or whether that's about kind of fundraising and making larger pots of cash, they're skills that you're going to need to get to grips with and practice. And again, the first time you do it, it could be complete pants, and that's absolutely fine. You're going to have loads of chances to practice this stuff and to refine it. And as you do, you'll also start to build a crowd and a community around the things you do. They're going to be really, really, really important to you. So other people are going to be vital to you getting work, to you sustaining yourself, and to you achieving the things that you're really excited by, I guess. So that's the kind of roundup of my like top tips, my hard fought knowledge on being a freelancer. And I know that Susie has got some questions potentially brewing as well. So maybe this is a nice time to have a look at those.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. And thank you very much for that presentation and all those tips. Like you said, hard fought, experienced, experienced tips. Learn sometimes the hardest of ways, but really, really useful. And also some lovely sort of links there and connections to other things people can find again. So I'm just going to repeat those back to you. There's another masterclass on the Barbican Theatre YouTube channel, which is about freelancing, and that goes into quite a lot of detail about pay and money, and so look at that. And then you also mentioned Amanda Palmer's TED Talk, The Art of Asking, and the fundraising story canvas that's on the Plymouth Culture website. So do check those out if you were so indulged in what Rachel was saying you forgot to.
Hopefully we can put some links in the description as well, so that there'll be a nice way to follow through on those.
Yes, that's the plan, I think. So thank you very much for talking us through all of that. I do have some questions that have come in from people ahead of the masterclass today. I've got 4. And I think the first one, which I come across quite a lot when I'm working with sort of practitioners just coming into sort of freelance world, is that big step, that big leap that you have to take when you are perhaps in part-time employment. It might not be the employment that you love, you might be working in a bar or in a coffee shop or what have you. It's taking that sort of big step, and I wondered if you would be able to sort of, what you would say to anyone considering that big leap.
Yeah, I think how quickly you can take that big leap probably depends on how safe you feel in taking it. And there's no problem with having a part-time job alongside building up a freelance practice. I think that's really sensible. I think that's a really nice way to do it, because again, that sense of like how you balance up the risks that you're taking is important. But sometimes there'll be an opportunity that just feels too good to say no to. And sometimes it's really worth going for that. So I think it really is to do with like how safe you feel yourself. I would always recommend people that trying things, like, again, gently putting their toe in, see how that is, try out one project, try out taking on one gig, before you like quit that full-time job that you have. A lot of people start things over a period of years as well. So like, boringly, it can take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I would agree. If we're using that analogy of taking a big leap, there's nothing wrong in having some stepping stones, or building yourself a bridge, like you said, a sort of a safety valve where you've got some money stored away and you've got some contacts. And my goodness me, it took me 10 years to become a full-on freelancer. I started off as a secondary school teacher, and then just sort of went more and more part-time. It took a long time. I'm not saying you all have to take 10 years, but actually sometimes
it's
no
also
harm in
kind of
that.
nice. Yeah, exactly. And I think that sense of like, you probably also will do lots and lots of different jobs before finding out the thing that like really makes your heart sing. And definitely, like when I was leaving school or when I was leaving college and university, like I had no idea that the types of jobs I do now even existed. So part of what you'll be doing is, as you're starting to meet people and as you're starting to chat with people about like the potentials for freelance work, is that you'll be finding out like jobs you never thought were even a thing, or stuff like that, that then become a thing that you get really passionate about. And I think that's like, like you can give yourself a break with that. That's okay.
Yeah, I agree. And as long as you've got something that's nourishing you within that role, it might just be the money or the friends that you have at your workplace, or there might be some creative curiosity that it provides. That's all nourishment, isn't it? And it just sort of supplements your journey wherever you're headed. And it's nice sometimes when you look back, you think actually all those things have had an impact on me as a freelancer, but you didn't know
you'll
at the
learn
time.
loads. Like doing any kind of like customer service role, doing any front of house role, you learn so much about like how to interact with people, about how to make sure that people feel comfortable. And those are all things that then you'll use like as a freelancer as well.
Brilliant. And nicely led into my next question, which is sort of, what are the benefits of being a freelancer as opposed to someone who is employed 9 to 5 or even sort of part-time employed? What do you think those benefits are?
I think it really suits some people, because it's like you get to write your own script. Like you get to kind of decide what things go in your diary, when you work, how you work, all of that kind of stuff. But I think that can also be like a real downside for people, because it's like you have to be really on it with managing your time, and you have to be really on it with like what you say yes and no to. And so that you don't end up like working 100-hour weeks or something, just to kind of make ends meet. So I think it's almost like the best things are like the worst things, at the same time. So, so, but yeah, for me, I think it's like that no 2 weeks are the same. I really like the variety. I really like the thing of not knowing exactly what I'm going to be doing in a few months' time, not knowing who I'll work with, who I'm going to be meeting. And for me, those are things that I really enjoy. I like that variety.
Yeah, that variety, that sort of independence that you get because you are your own boss, and that element of unknown, the adventure of what's to come.
Yeah,
I
you end
also
up in some very like strange places
you
as well,
do.
doing very strange things that you never expected.
And I think that that's a skill that's really important for people, even more now than ever, to sort of be okay with the unknown and to be okay with, you know, what you don't know is around the corner. So often we try and control all those elements, but actually as a freelancer and a creative, you embrace them because you just don't know what they might bring. So I think that's a really healthy benefit to being a freelancer. We're almost prepared for the world that we're in at the moment more than anyone
Yeah,
else.
definitely. I think that's like speaking to lots of people over the last year. Obviously, everyone's experience has been really different. But that sense of like, for a lot of people who are freelancing or living kind of precariously beforehand, it's like, yeah, okay, so the world's completely different. I can adapt, I can change things. And that's quite different maybe for a lot of people who have like were previously in kind of full-time work and employed and salaried, and then they're like, wow, the thing I do doesn't exist anymore. So I think that's, yeah, it's quite a biggie.
Yeah, indeed. I have another question for you,
They
which
come
is
thick and fast, Susan. I like it.
no, I'm this one is about sort of you personally and what you tend to do, about juggling your workload. So we know you're called 5 Jobs Dobbs. Okay, so
Yeah,
there's
a
a
terrible nickname.
I like it a lot. It's going to catch on. We might put that in brackets when we advertise
No.
the class. um, Obviously that takes a lot of skill and organization that's learned through time how to manage something like that. But I wonder how you actually do organize yourself when you've got a heavy workload and you're juggling. What do you do?
Yeah. I've got this special productivity tool, which is a paper diary. And in the paper diary, there's lots of like stickers and things written in. So I can kind of code the different stuff that I'm doing so that when I sometimes like in the morning, I can't remember exactly all the things that I'm meant to be doing that day, but like past me has written them down in my diary and has written down the information that I need so that I can find the rest of the information somewhere else. So that's like a thing, like I lost one of my diaries about 2 years ago, and it was like the bottom fell out of everything because I had to repatch like all the information from all these different places. So that for me is like a real big one. And then, like I was saying, all the projects that I work on with other people, we tend to like share documents and create like timelines for projects so that we really know what to expect at different times. And if we're delivering a specific thing, we'll always work back from that thing. So one of the things that I'm doing at the moment is doing some graphic design for a board game company. So we're working backwards from the date that they want to launch everything. And then we work out when they need to send everything to the printers. And then we work out when I need to have done the final draft of everything. And from there, blah, blah, blah. You know, we kind of work backwards in that way. I think that's a really nice way of thinking about managing like a project and some work that you've got to do, because that's the other thing you don't have when you're freelance is like a boss who tells you how to do things or what order to do them in. So yeah, for me it's things like an old-fashioned paper diary and then lots of different documents on my computer and lots of those will be shared with other people that I'm working on.
Brilliant. And a good tip to sort of work backwards, isn't it? You know, naturally that's more
Yeah,
realistic than just planning everything and then realizing you're 2 weeks late, or you've got to squidge everything into the final week. I am also a fan of a paper diary. I've never fully gone technological, and I do use my Google Calendar, but if you've got 5 different jobs and 5 different email accounts and 5 different systems, it's not always very helpful. So
yeah, it can be a lot of different calendars to keep up with.
yeah,
And I think, yeah, trying to just have one space. And also the other thing, like with having just an analog diary, like a paper diary or something, is nobody else can write things in there. Whereas when you have electronic like calendars, other people can like suddenly write in that you have a meeting or something. And I think when you're having to manage your own time, like I'm having to manage my own time, I also need to be really able to say like yes or no quite clearly to something. So I can't have somebody else like agree on my behalf.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And lists. I love a list. I love a to-do list daily.
Definitely, yeah. And you might have multiple ones for multiple different projects.
Yes, many pages of lists, yes.
Yeah.
Jobs. Brilliant, thank you. So everyone's different, but I think it's quite useful just to talk about actually what things work for people. And then look forward to the days, all of you, when you have 5 jobs like Dobbs does.
Oh no.
Like, woo, I've made it.
Have like 2 or 3. 2 or 3 is plenty.
Yeah, I know. I remember sort of boasting recently that I was like, I've only got 2 jobs now. Well, no, maybe 3, sort of 2.5, you know, but being quite proud of the I've only got 2.5. And speaking of that, this brings me on nicely to the final question I have here, which is, as a freelancer, how do you manage to give yourself a holiday?
I think that's the other thing that I use my diary for. So sometimes at the start of the year, I will, a bit like when I have worked in an office job, I will like book my holiday into my calendar. So and actually it's really easy, because then you just say to people, I'm really sorry, I'm going to be on leave on that day. And they're like, oh, wow, you take holidays? And I reassure them that, yeah. But I think that's a really key thing. Also, a few years ago as well, I stopped saying yes to working on Saturdays or working at weekends. And that was just like a kind of lifestyle thing for me, where I was like, it doesn't work with the rest of my life to also work on the weekends. But depending on the type of work you do, for some people, it only happens at weekends, you know. So there's this kind of thing of like, how do you like balance out, yeah, like how much time you have to yourself. But I definitely try and think about, like, a lot of organizations that employ me, all of their staff will get at least 28 days leave in a year. So I think about that when I'm like laying out my holiday time in my diary, and I think about, yeah, how to kind of manage that. But usually I don't get like huge long chunks of time, you know. You don't get to go away for a month usually or anything. But like short and regular time off suits me.
And it's important, isn't it? You know,
Yeah,
you're not going to work fully to and be the most healthiest person you need to be, because there's no sick pay as a freelancer,
exactly.
you know.
Yeah,
So
you really do have to like look after yourself. And that's another thing that I have learned the hard way, you know, after really pushing it and then getting ill and just being like, oh, okay, I need to rest, I need to take time off. And I'd highly recommend it to other people. It's hard. You've got to be like disciplined with yourself to do it. But yeah, taking time off is important.
it is, and it's so tempting when another job comes in which has got a great amount of money attached to it over the summer, because often that happens, you know. There's a fair amount of seasonal work sometimes for freelancers, especially being sort of live arts performers like myself. that's where the money is, you know, in the
Yeah.
summer when the tourists are down. So it's hard sometimes to say, no, I'm not working that week, when you know you're missing out on, you know, a show at a festival or something. But I agree, it is important to take your holidays and to look after
But
yourself.
sometimes when you start to like spot those patterns as well, sometimes then it's quite nice to think, okay, well, maybe I just work for 4 months like non-stop, and that means I don't have to work for big chunks of the rest of the year. So like, again, it really depends on what you're doing and that kind of demand. But yeah, like if a lot of your work is attached to, say, like music festivals that all happen in the summer, then you're going to need to go like good guns and do that for that period of time. But it might mean that then you work on your own projects all through the winter, and that might be a really nice way to kind of balance it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't forget, while you're doing all this work creatively, it's wonderful, but also it, you know, enjoy your life, and don't forget to plan that in as a freelancer. What are the things I like to do just for me? Otherwise your job becomes your whole world. And yeah, I mean, I'm not preaching to the converted, because I'm terrible at it myself. But I think it is important, if I was to give one tip, it would be, remember what else you love in your life and make time for it.
Really nice. Yeah.
Well, that's all the questions I have that's come from the panel, and from the people that have been listening along. So I just wondered if there's anything else that you wanted to make sure you add in to this presentation or to talk through before we finish up.
Yeah, I think like it's so worth taking that plunge. So we were talking a bit earlier about like, how do you kind of make those first steps, or how do you kind of set up on your own in some way? And I think like it's really worth kind of following that interest and following that way of doing things. And yeah, I just really like to encourage people to, like, my parents still ask me when I'm going to get a proper job. And like, I'm kind of established in what I'm doing. So that type of question won't go away, you know. And also I've got lots of friends who've got like big houses or cars or things that I don't afford because it's not the type of money that I earn. But when we talk about like how much we're enjoying our lives and how passionate we feel about the things that we do, they're often kind of like, wow, I wish I had done something like that. I wish I had followed that kind of way of doing things. So I think, yeah, I'd like to encourage people to really give it a go and really like think about those things that you're passionate about and that you want to skill up in and work in.
Amazing. Thank you for that final bit of advice. Take the plunge, take the leap, give it a go. And listen into some of those other masterclasses and other links that will drop into this YouTube connection once we've set it up on YouTube. And thank you very much, Rachel Dobbs, for your precious freelance time today. We are very pleased to have spoken to you, and hopefully we shall hear from you or see from you very soon.
Oh, nice, Susie. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.